resume our budget work session. There was an outstanding set of questions surrounding police and headcount and departments, so we decided to ask Chief Ice to dress up and come talk to us. So, yeah. So, you want to come on up I'll kind of frame this for you, Chief, in this regard. Obviously, yours and Greg's judgment about people is the subject matter expert, but from a data standpoint, we've got lots of things coming at us. So the original assessment that says you don't need any new officers back in 2016, but if we grow, you might need 3. Recommended 1, and you asked for 4. I think what would help us is, before we get into any of that, could you just explain what's happened, what's transpired from a service impact perspective since 2016, or from whenever you looked at it, so we have a better understanding of what's going on. I think that's the big question that would help the board initially.
Okay, so the last time we met, you wanted to have the numbers compared from 2013 to 2018. In that study that they did, they mentioned that unless we had some significant growth, leave patrol alone with the amount of people that we have, and unless the detectives' caseload grew, to leave those alone as well. We've grown in both areas. So what I want to go through first is explain to you the different areas and different functions of the police department, the main ones, and then we'll go into the statistics. So patrol, we have 17 sworn officers in that position. They are responsible for catching calls, writing tickets, preventative patrols, directing traffic, report writing, and training, and they're required to do community projects. So in the career development plan, they have to have X amount of years in that position, X amount of training, and then they're also required to do a community project every year. So in reality, we're all community police officers. It's just the ones that are labeled community police officers have specific training towards that and have a little more responsibility in that area. So patrol is really the backbone of the police department. The detectives, we have 4. I have a lieutenant, criminal investigator, and 2 drug/ABC officers. The criminal investigators investigate all felony cases and some of the more serious misdemeanor cases. The drug officers are responsible for the alcohol inspections for every place that sells alcohol inside the town limits, or buys alcohol from our ABC store, as well as drug investigations. The community police squad has 1 supervisor.
That's the ABC boundary, right? That
Right.
extends up to Wesley Chapel, or not?
I think the only one we had in Wesley Chapel was
Hickory Tavern,
and we don't have that anymore. They've started buying their alcohol elsewhere. So, but I think we got Firethorn Country Club that we go outside of. Community police squad, we have 1 supervisor who is over the community police squad, but he's also over recruiting, procurement. He's kind of our handyman around here as well. And he does a lot of the administrative work for patrol. He has 3 officers underneath him. You got Vic and Kevin, who are the key community police officers who are involved in the downtown events, the programs in the community, i.e. Neighborhood Watch. We do that backpack event every year for the kids. Their whole mission is to focus on the kids and building relationships with them and the downtown community. They do approximately over 150 events a year where they're out there involved in the community and are really the ambassadors for the town and the police department. They do a great job. I don't know if another department's got a community police squad like we do. So, and then we have also animal control, which is what Bobby does. He helps out them, but he also does the animal control calls that are here in town, does the rabies clinics, tries to get them to participate in chipping their animals, and I think they're getting ready to do the pet data that we came to you about more recently. So that kind of breaks it down for the department as to what each one's responsibilities are and why we have them in the positions that they are. It would be very difficult for me to pull from one unit to feed patrol just because of the importance of what each one of them are doing. 2013, we had 26,000 calls for service. 2018, we had 28,000. Those are broke down into both self-initiated and dispatch calls. Self-initiated could be traffic stops. You see something in a neighborhood that you're going to stop and check out instead of being dispatched to. That type of stuff. The rest is dispatch calls that consist of, the traffic accidents, Part 1 crimes, Part 2 crimes. I hate to say nuisance calls, but calls that aren't really that difficult that they're dispatched to. And it may be an extra patrol, that type of stuff, barking dog, stuff like that. So the call volume has gone up. Citations have actually gone down. And part of the reason is because the other calls have gone up and we're not out there able to write as many citations as what we were writing. In 2013, we wrote 2,660 citations. In 2018, we wrote 1,847. A lot of that is because we're not got the time to go out and run the radar and do the traffic stops that we did. Some of it is because we've had guys in rookie school and we've been shorthanded on a lot of that stuff. But as a result of that, our traffic accidents have gone up because we haven't been out there doing traffic enforcement as much. Our traffic accidents in 2013 were 256. In 2018, they bumped up to 375. Our Part 1 crimes, which are more serious, more violent crimes, murder, rape, that type of thing, in 2013 was around 200. In 2018, they were 300. Part 2 crimes were around 1,000, and in 2018, they're 1,500. I won't be able to get you the 2019 stats until towards the end of the year, but there's no signs of us letting up.
Part 2 is drug-related?
It could be drug-related crimes. A lot of it is. Our drug guys, have hit more houses in the last month than the whole county combined with search warrants. We do have a problem with opioids and heroin, and it's not just in the bad neighborhoods. Last week in Anklin Forest, we had an overdose, and we can't just treat that as just an overdose death. With the new laws that are coming out, we're going after the dealers. So if we can we have to investigate that like it's a homicide, and if we can find out who the dealer is and can prove that they're the ones that gave them the heroin, we can charge them with death by distribution. So we're starting to see an uptick, not just in this town, and everywhere, but especially in the county, in drug-related issues. Since August of 2018, till May of this year, I had the drug guys pull up the charges that they did, and they've done 167 drug charges in 9 months for that. And with that, a lot of them are big search warrants that we've done, that we've gotten a good bit of amount of drugs and currency. So along with that, you know, we've got the growth, the seriousness of our calls are growing. Nothing major has happened here. God forbid that it ever does. But I think you can see in the last week how it can happen to a small community. Mooresville just lost an officer. Considered a very safe community. The school shooting at the college. You know, Parkdale in Florida was the second safest city in Florida. So to say that none of this can happen, or wait until it does happen to try and fix the issues, I think we're putting ourselves in a bad position. I realize it. I get it. If we don't have the funds to do exactly what I'm asking to do, I get it. And I think Greg and I are on the same page. We know that there's issues. We're working towards fixing it every year. But I feel like we're behind now, and if we don't make some changes soon, we're always going to be chasing that can down the road. Drive time to the jail is 35 minutes. So when an officer takes someone to jail, he's gone in roughly 2 hours. To get from Sims Road all the way down to Bonds Grove Church Road is a 17-minute drive with no traffic. So when you're backing each other up, that's a factor. And when it's bottlenecked downtown, then you got to take the outside roads to get there. So all those are conditions, along with the railroad tracks going through town, that I think put us in a very unique position that a lot of towns don't have to deal with. I had them pull up how many times we've been down to 2 officers on a squad in the last year, and it was for A and B squads, it was 137 times, and for C and D squads, it was almost that as well. That gets to be pretty dangerous. If one of them's tied up, then you're starting to ask guys to go to serious calls by themselves. And that's not even counting the times we've gone down to 1 officer. And that really is an issue then. Now what we're doing, and I've asked permission from Greg, and he's been gracious enough to okay that, is we're trying to cover that with overtime. If we know ahead of time, then we're calling guys in. If it happens during a shift and we weren't prepared for it, we try to call people in the best we can. There's been many times where the captain, the lieutenant, myself have come in and covered a shift until they can get the guys back and working. So we're doing the best we can. We're doing what we can to keep it from getting really, really bad. But it's to the point now where, you know, we've got to step up and start doing something. So, do you have any questions on that?
Who's got questions?
I have a question. So,
Commissioner Wesolek.
on the organizational report, it mentions 2 part-time detectives. Are the detectives now all 4 full-time?
Yes, that was given to me last year because they were retired and could only work so many hours. They were working 35 hours a week. So we made them, one retired, we made them full-time positions, and the captain actually come out of retirement so they can work those hours and do that. So before that, we got 1 officer, I think, during Warren's time here, and I think that's all we've got.
And then, so I'm trying to add up what you told me. I might have missed something. I know that you had said 27 officers. So there's 17 patrol officers, 4 detectives, 2 community resource officers, 1 animal control. So I'm missing something.
The
captain.
Yeah, the chief, the captain, and the community police lieutenant.
Okay, so I was counting that in the community resource. Okay. there's actually like 3 under that department, okay.
Commissioner Byrne?
How many admin do you have?
I got, that aren't sworn officers, 2.
2.
I got 1 upstairs and 1 downstairs.
How many reserves do you leverage?
It depends. Right now, we have right around 3. A lot of times what we'll do too is if somebody wants to come to work here, we don't have any positions, we'll offer them a reserve position, see how they work out, and then a lot of times we'll draw from reserves and bring them on full-time. But we average about 3 reserves right now. We got the chaplain who is a sworn officer, and then we've got 2 other officers that come in, and they have to give us so many hours. They help us with the downtown. Greg was gracious enough to approve the reserves to get paid the off-duty to work the events to help alleviate some of what's going on there, and we actually did that this weekend. It helped out a good bit. And then on top of that, they've got their responsibilities. Struby helps us with forensic computer crimes, jailbreaking those when we have situations there. Perez does the same thing, and then the chaplain does chaplain duties and is actually a sniper on the SRT team. So we utilize them the best we can. And we're always looking for reserves.
You staff the SRT from within the existing officers?
Yes, sir.
So that's others' duties as assigned?
Yes, sir.
How many full-time as well as reserves did it take to cover the event this weekend?
I'd be guessing, but I'm saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8.
Other questions?
Now, the reserves are reserves per month, per year, those 3 that you have. How long are they with you? As long as you need them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time when we get a reserve, it's either somebody that wants to come on full-time or it's somebody who has a career established in another field but is a sworn, has gone through the BLET and is sworn, and just, they have to do so many hours a month to hold their certification, but they don't want to be full-time police officers, so we utilize them that way.
And understanding that the crime has changed somewhat between 2013 and 2018, with that increase, do you see, let me rephrase, with the crime as it is now, Part 1, Part 2 type crime, and the number of officers that you have out on patrol, you said it's not good, or you can't rotate the others around to assist because,
Well, they got to have time off.
okay,
They work 2 days on, 2 days off. Every other weekend is a 3-day weekend. You're going to bring these guys out if you have them working 7 days a week all the time. And that's not even counting the off-duty stuff that we're having to cover that we're being requested by the churches and what have you to deal with the traffic that's at the other end of town. So, the scheduling that we got is what the majority of the departments across the country are using.
some of the scheduling, though, then now is not so much, well, I won't say not so much, but it's not totally due to crime, but due to other things that the officers have to cover within the town, be it events, be it covering church, street or activities such as that. But everything is not directed at the crime right now for
No.
the coverage.
No, the scheduling would be the same regardless, just because you got to have a structured set of time for them to work. They work a 12-hour shift, 6 to 6, and like I said, they're 2 days on, 2 days off, and then they'll work a 3-day weekend, and then the next weekend they have a 3-day weekend off. So coupled with the call-outs that we may have, the off-duty that we may have, and their regular shift work, I mean, I don't know how we could do it any differently than what we're doing.
Let me ask you a couple different, you may have said it, I missed it, your detectives, what is their volume now versus when? you-
Volume, in years past, it was about 40 active caseloads on their desks. They have 60 right now. Those cases, it's not like a call, you go out there, you take the report, and it's done. Some of these cases take legwork, and some of it means going outside the area to run down leads and suspects that they may do. So a case can take a good while to be able to close out and solve. So, I mean, it's partly one of the reasons, coupled with the call volume, is they've increased their caseload and are staying pretty busy doing that. But I will say this, when they can, they help out patrol the best they can and cover for them. But, you know, it's, again, you get overwhelmed with some of the stuff that's going on. For instance, tomorrow, all hands are on deck. We got the vice president coming through town. So, I mean, everybody is coming into work except for the night shift to cover that. I mean, I've got detectives, everybody covering intersections and doing that. So that type of stuff, everybody's willing to pitch in and do what we can to help fulfill the mission of what's at hand.
Just so that I understand the process when there's a crime scene investigation, such as the example you gave for in England Forest over the weekend. So do the two detectives stay for several hours, or one or two, and are there also patrol officers that stay and secure that whole scene, or what's the time of something like that?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So the first ones on scene obviously are going to be the patrol officers. They're called out there. When they've got a situation like that, they'll secure the scene, and they'll start taking statements. They'll call a detective out. The detective will come out, process the scene, help interview the necessary people needed interviewing, establish the case file, bring it back, and then they'll start working leads and going from there off of that. So it depending on the crime as to how long you're actually there. You know, obviously a homicide, you're going to be there a good long time. So it just depends and varies. A rape, it's going to take a while. You know, by the time you get them, you interview them, you get them to the hospital, you do a rape kit on them. It's time consuming on what happens there. Basically, when a patrol responds there, if it's a serious enough crime, they'll secure the scene and they'll call the investigator out and notify the captain and myself.
One of the things highlighted in the organizational assessment was proactive versus reactive. And the number of citations dropping sounds like we're in far more reactive than proactive. Is that a correct interpretation?
We're headed that way, yes.
Do we have other questions?
Now, the number of citations dropping and saying that we're reacting or being reactive due to the fact that we don't have the necessary staff to
I think it's
handle
coupled
it?
with a couple of things. I think, one, the call volume going up a little bit, the lack of officers that I have, whether they're in school or we just don't have them, I think is all coupled together is one reason why we're getting less and less of that.
Any additional questions?
Now, with the call volume going up, you noted that some of the calls with that call volume might just be due to barking dogs or just nuisances.
Well, I
but
broke it down for you with the part 1 and the part 2 crimes, and they've upticked too. They've gone up as well.
They've gone up as well.
Questions to the left? Questions to the right?
So not being reactive no, go ahead.
Go ahead, because I got one more issue that doesn't pertain to that after.
Not being reactive is how you brought forth your request for the number of officers to now assist with what you believe is needed moving forward?
The reason I put that number out there and asked for one is because I feel it's a safety issue. When I got 1, 2, 3 officers that go to the jail, then that leaves the town uncovered or very lightly covered. And by the time we get people called in and everything, you know, it's a while. So it can put us in a dangerous situation.
Are there, just so I understand, 2 shifts that you say, an A and a B, but then is there also a night shift? Is that 3 shifts, or is that?
A and B
two?
covers today. So squad is on the day shift, B squad is on the night shift. Tomorrow, C squad will take over, and D shift will be on the night shift. So you got 4 squads.
4 squad, okay, that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to understand, okay.
And number of personnel per squad, per shift that you have right now is,
Some of them only have 2 on them.
some have 2? There was something you noted, I believe it was the last time you said there were 12 officers or something, 3, and maybe I'm misstating that you had, and you wanted to make it 4
I want 4 officers per squad.
per squad, A, B, C, D.
Right.
And right now, it's 3 per
There-
squad.
There's some that have 3 and some that have just 2.
Okay, that was, okay.
Maybe you need to clarify the numbers. So you have 17 patrol. Break that down by the squads. How that, because
So A squad, I have sergeant and 2 officers. B squad, I have a sergeant and 1 officer until one gets out of training. C squad, I have a sergeant and 2 officers. And D squad, I have a sergeant and 2 officers, with 1 of them in training.
that's 12.
36, 9, 12.
Where does
Where's
the
the
17 come from?
Well, then you got the K-9s that are working the swing shift, which is where they're most effective.
2 K-9.
Right.
And then you have lieutenants over them?
Yes.
So that's where the additional 4 come in. I was trying to make the numbers, Josh. Anybody else?
So in reviewing the video, I saw where it was brought up about town hall and the police department. We can accommodate several offices over here for town hall. IT has an office here and as well as town hall. You could bring 2 IT guys over here, already have offices here. And you could bring somebody else, someone like Paula, put her down at the front desk and do her work, and that would also alleviate the need for another admin assistant to cover the window up front. That would free up 3 offices up front. The only spare space we got is storage space, and I did the numbers on it, and it's 2,730 square feet, which is not even, I mean, that's less than what you got where you're at. And again, that would take away storage from us and the town. Town also uses storage up there as well. So we've tried it before. Town hall didn't like it. We didn't like it. It hindered us from doing a lot of things. When they built this building, it was brought up before the board then. If that's what they wanted to do, they need to make that decision then so that they could lay the building out in a way that it would be conducive for that. They opted not to do that, and it would be very, very difficult to do that now. You would take a lot from the police department in doing so. So that's all I got.
Other questions? I know you got to get up to wherever you're going. Meetings, so. If there's no other questions, Chief, thank you very much for making time. Any reaction from the board?
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to further discuss,
What does everybody want to do?
make any changes to that?
I'd like to see that there are 2 officers.
I agree.
There's
I think,
consensus
I
amongst
think
the-
2 would help. And then review it next year, or have it relooked at next year, and determine how much help those 2 officers were.
Okay, so there's consensus to change it from 1 to 2, so we'll put that in, ask that change to be made to the budget. That's I think if I recall the document or the budget, that's 25,000 in salary and benefits, or I'm sorry, 75,000. And then obviously the capital goes with it, vehicle, et cetera, so that's the budgetary impact of that. Next item, the only other item that is succinct is direction on salary and compensation and the like. There's a couple of things. I mean, Greg, maybe you could help us with this one. Is there a reason that the assistant to the town manager hasn't been moved to the clerk's department yet? From the clerk's department to the administrative?
It's a budgetary item that can be shown in either area, and traditionally it was in the clerk's office, and there was discussion about whether it would stay there or not. I think it's quite appropriate to have it either place, so it really doesn't matter.
Okay.
It'd be very simple to move it.
The question came up just because the role has evolved to more.
Yeah, we'll be happy to show it differently or whatever.
Okay. Compensation and benefits. How do you guys want to tackle that?
I'm looking at, just so if anybody else wants to look on page 8 in the proposed budget book. So you're asking for a market adjustment as well as merit increase, correct? Is that how it's broken down?
That's correct.
Okay, and so I'm just trying to understand the percentage and everything. So, and that's that would be an increase of, what would be the percentage increase from last year, what we did in the budget, when it was just merit increase?
So last year there was a 3% merit was the maximum. And as merit works, you're eligible for 0 on the low end to the high end. This represents 2% merit and 2% market. So the total last year maximum would have been 3.
So we're just talking a 1% increase from last year,
if it's earned.
if you look at it that way. And is that, so this 1% increase, is that the total of the 75,000 that's listed here, or is that a different number? Do you even,
So 2%, are you referring to market or merit?
I guess I'm trying to break it down, that extra 1%, what exactly that dollar amount is? Is there a way to even,
Yeah, I mean, we can quantify that.
I don't know if
Roughly half.
Lisa's back there. How much? 35,000, okay.
So I went back and did some classifications or some number crunching. And number one, I don't think there's any doubt that that the board concurs that investing in employees is, if not number one, right up there is number one. importance. Since 2016 to 2018, we've roughly had a 20% increase in compensation and benefits, and then from 2018 to this proposed budget, it's another 24%. It's a big ticket item that really warrants thoughtful consideration. One of the things that, as I looked around at Kannapolis, Concord, Davidson, Charlotte, there is no rhyme or reason as to one approach versus another. But what has been very consistent is all of them are aggressively looking at the compensation and benefit studies for all the roles. They've all either done it in the last couple of years, they've updated their policies, and they've built in the policy the need to do that on a much more regular basis. We haven't done it in 4 years. We can, one of the things that I can't remember which town did it, but one of the thoughts running through my mind right now is why not go with 3% merit and budget in an employee compensation and benefit study to be done at the end of September with recommendations implemented beginning in the second quarter of the fiscal year, whatever those recommendations become, and make it fact-based and make those adjustments. It might delay that aspect of it for 3 months, but I think the manager is probably correct that we're behind. And certainly as you look at the compensation for the roles coming on and the wild swings in the budgets, compensation and benefits budget for different departments, it's very obvious that we need to make some adjustments. What those adjustments are, though, personally would like it grounded quickly in fact, and then let's implement and make sure we hold monies, but make sure we have the monies to do something like that in the September-October timeframe, and make those adjustments. I had a brief conversation with the mayor of Pineville, and he reminded me that they had to, because they dragged their feet, they had to make, and he used the term loosely, they had to make an 8% adjustment, which basically had a very major impact on the rest of their budget. I wouldn't want us to be in a position like that. I don't know if 4% is right. It might be more, it might be right. I don't know, but at least we can get on with the merit and then make the adjustment effective October 1st with whatever comes back as a recommendation. That's just a thought as I looked at what has been done in a number of municipalities and recognizing that completely do believe that we have some adjustments necessary and probably need to ground it. Personally think we need to ground it in fact, but so I put that out there as a possible way to move forward to position us both policy-wise and pay scale-wise and grid-wise and benefit-wise, a path forward, aggressive path forward, to be honest.
So therefore, we would be doing, or if we agreed to do, would be doing the 3% merit increase, deferring the additional increase until the study came back. And then we can see if in fact that the additional increase with the percentage that was requested is now based in fact, or if in fact we then need to increase possibly that amount that was requested as well. That could also be part of the survey, a study that comes back to us, if I'm understanding. Because I believe that HR Wendy did say that she agreed that a salary study, which I think is approximately $12,000 if I noted, is something that needed to be done, if I'm correct? Yes? Okay. So therefore, then we would just defer that until the fall and come back and revisit it in the second quarter toward next
So,
quarter?
I guess I'm looking at it less as a deferral and more as a two-step process. So, I think what we've called out is that we have a gray area in the policy, both what is merit and, you know, in one place we state that that's what we'll do, and that's what has been implemented. It seems to be gray as to whether or not we can do it, so let's define what our policy really is. On the benefit side, we really don't have a statement of policy, and if you go to all of the other municipalities, they make it real clear how they want to invest in their people. And so that's why I said employee compensation and benefits study. I think the manager's message highlighted that we have some issues with classification. We had to make a classification adjustment to bring in our director of planning. We may have others, so we study the classifications. If you look at other municipalities, they break it between police and others, so we have the full picture there. And then what that comes back, then we implement that, and then that's the path forward. So I don't know if it's a deferral of 1% or if it's the implementation of an additional 3%.
But we
whatever.
won't know that
We
until
won't
we
know
get
that until we get the study back. Right.
Which is why we would not possibly move forward on that additional increase until that comes back. With the study,
We'd make the adjustments based upon the study.
based upon,
And-
with the study. That's
Yeah.
what I said. Okay.
That's just a thought. Commissioner Burns?
I think that we need to take the market adjustment out of this budget until we get the assessment back. Go with a 0 to 3% merit increase, depending on the managers and directors' assessment of each of their staff. And then look at this when the assessment comes back for the salary and put all the pieces together so that we have all the facts, all the numbers to make a educated decision.
Because one of the things too, when I was doing the number crunching calculations, and again, this was all done by hand, the actual salary compensation increase when you factor in the probationary potential raise, et cetera, from a budget standpoint, year on year, it's actually 6%. Again, that's not bad, that's not good, it just is. I'm not making a value judgment, but it does warrant we update where we are and make sure we're being as competitive, as fair, and equitable as possible. That's why I brought it up. Commissioner Lee?
I would agree with going with the 0 to 3% merit increase and holding off on any market adjustment until we receive a study back.
Is there anything in this, I'm zipping through it here, but the policy regarding percentages on merit increases, is there a max?
There is no max. Basically, Waxhaw, like every other municipality, calculates the raise based upon the dollars available. Understanding that to try to remain competitive. If you look at our dollar amount, certainly can afford the 3%, which has been, and I just did that based upon last year more than anything, and then, but with the understanding we would come back in October, aggressively do the study, and come back in October, and then have to implement what the study tells us.
Okay, so we just increased a police officer, which is determined here, actually says on page 8, 72,000.
Mhm.
Where is that now coming out of the budget? And are you saying that it would be a budget amendment in October if I'm just trying to understand the accounting here. I don't know if Lisa needs to explain that, or Greg. Because we're now going to have to adjust this budget by increasing a police officer. So how does that work?
So the staff will have to come back with a recommendation as to how the budget could be adjusted. Right. Unless there's direction given by the board where you want it adjusted, but we'll come back with a recommended change to the proposed budget. Yeah. And it will reflect quite likely whatever else goes with the personnel cost, because the personnel costs are part of it, but we'll have to go back and look at the vehicle request and whether that was attached to a position or not, and look at the detail there.
Now, if we were to increase the merit percentage to 4%, which would be then based on your determination of, how much any employee would get, how do you figure that into the budget? Would that then basically be budgeted to a similar number that you were putting there, or?
So the total of 4% is already there. It's 2% merit, 2% market. If there's 3% merit, then the amount that's budgeted in the two pieces would be reduced. There would then be an add back for the pay and classification study. And the pay and classification study is really two parts. So it is, are our positions classified the way they need to be classified? So what happens there is an internal work effort that goes on. So there's a document distributed to each employee that asks them to describe their job, what they do, what they require, and then the actual job description is reviewed, rewritten if needed, expanded if needed. And then once that step is accomplished and you actually are to a point where a job classification is established, then you can go, in some cases, in most cases, probably verify and give validity to what's already there. But if there's been a change in scope or duties, those get added. That's when you then look at the market. Once you've got the accurate data and verified data for what you're comparing, and you make the comparison to the market. And so the market is not just the public sector, but it's private sector. It's localities of our similar size, but it does include some private sector data. So that would then, it's about a 3 to 4 month process. It's roughly, I think, 13,000 plus expenses, depending on which firm, but that's the estimate that we have. That would then be brought back as a report.
Because I think what I was questioning originally was, I do believe that there are some positions that we probably need to increase because of the competition out there for those positions. And then there may be others that we are paying accurately, and we don't know that until we do the study. But I think if we could at least give Greg the ability to go up to a 4% merit, at least gives that him the opportunity to give those who perhaps really need a little bit more to keep our employees, that might be a way to do it while we're waiting for the study.
I don't agree. I've already stated my opinion on this.
That would sound to me like trying to use a market increase under the heading of a merit increase, if you're saying what people would need in order to stay, as opposed to a reward for having done their job exemplary well. And I would not agree to that. I would agree to 3%.
Up to 3%.
Yes.
I don't know the work that is done in the town hall, but I wouldn't imagine that everyone would get a 3%, but I guess that's based on the manager and the directors. Hopefully they would, but customarily that's not the case.
I mean, I'm comfortable with the 3%, and I trust Greg's judgment if he needs to make I got to keep somebody budget adjustment, that obviously he would come back and make that as part of this. I hesitate to try to use merit for retention. Merit is merit, and I actually think if we start the work soon, and if we have to make it a budget adjustment this year to get it started, let's move forward, and so we're ready with the monies in the implementation beginning in October 1. If there's somebody that we're worried about losing, then we need to address that immediately. I mean, we should be addressing it now, not waiting for this budget. And I trust Greg's judgment on that to address that. And make the adjustment in this budget year, and then they would get the 3% anyway. So my suggestion would be address it now if that's the case. I trust Greg's judgment on staff, and then go 3% in a study. That's where I would recommend.
So even with the 3% and based upon the study itself, if I'm understanding, the town manager then would still have the ability to come back even under this budget if he sees a need to increase someone else's salary for some particular reason, as you stated, that we can still adjust that to cover that need right now until we get the study back in the fall. He can make that request.
He can certainly make that decision, make that adjustment in this year's budget if we have an exposure.
Okay.
If he has an exposure, I mean that would
That
Make a
was
suggestion that might make it a little easier. One thing that we can certainly do is talk to the consultant, whoever that is that's picked, and ask them for feedback and information as to what typically are they going to find in a community of 18,000 people. You know, what is that dollar amount typically? Not saying that we're going to be right on the average, but then that amount, you know, could be budgeted as part of this process, so that if you get to October and you've got a report and the number comes back and it's X, that there's not a, oh no, we didn't plan for this.
I think that's a great idea.
So that approach is really what I would recommend, because with the amount of work that is done internally to go through asking each employee what their job consists of, and how that whole 3 to 4 month process kind of works out, for better or for worse, it does create an internal expectation for almost everybody.
Sure.
That something great's going to happen. You know, everybody feels like they don't get compensated like they should. That's just a natural human instinct. What we communicate internally, however, is your position may be compensated fairly for what you do. We value you. The study is not about the person, it's about the position. And so while you may be doing your job extremely well, how is the position compensated? Now, they take into account, when they do a study like this, how many years of experience does the person in the position have? What experience do they have? Are they highly educated in that position, or are they below what would be the norm today as we have grown into a larger community for that position? So those factors do come into play toward the end of the study when compensation gets to be the issue, but the beginning position is, what does the position itself need to be paid in a fair market? And
So you're I want to make sure I understand and everybody understands. What you're suggesting that would make it simpler would be, let's say it's 3% merit now, and then budget X percent for implementation, and potential implementation in October. So we've already set the monies aside for the implementation of the, right?
And if the implementation cost is below the average, then that money just sits there and falls back into fund balance, or can be appropriated differently by the board.
Fair.
If it's above the appropriated amount, then the board would have to have a budget amendment to accomplish.
And we're doing it based upon that subject matter expert's opinion, which I have no doubt that's going to be a number that, I mean, every study that I looked at, your 2% probably was consistent year after year after year as you look around this region. So I think that's very fair. Commissioner Lee?
Can I ask, what is that amount that you intend to budget ahead to save and reserve?
I think that's a question that we're going to ask the consultant, is based on our community size,
Okay.
they're probably going to come back with an answer that's a range.
Can
You're
we
not
do
gonna-
that before the budget is due?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well then I think that's wonderful.
That's fair.
So consensus on that, or?
Yes,
approach?
That's fair.
we
Okay,
have a consensus.
all right. Good. And I guess my follow-up
I'm
question.
sorry, did you have
Yeah.
something to say?
Yes, Commissioner Burns is just staring at me, and I'm wondering if there's anything more you need to.
I'd say we have a consensus. If you have something to say to me,
I
bring
Okay,
just did.
all
bring
right.
it forward.
That's, Greg, I have a question. Is there any reason why we couldn't initiate the study in this budget year? I mean, we'd have to make the budget amendment, et cetera, but get the ball rolling, knowing what we want to do?
There would have to be a budget amendment
Yeah.
to fund the study to initiate it. It would not be completed, however, until next year. So, we would have to find out how the compensation is set up for
But
the.
there's nothing that says we can start, because I think you and staff have correctly identified probably our biggest issue, and that is we've got to get this modernized. And I think it's important to move forward, so, okay. Other than that, are there other issues that people, or topics that people want to talk about? Because we have the public hearing coming up, and obviously that's a time where we can share our questions as we go through it. We can get additional clarification questions that help communicate in our own minds what the budget represents. I mean, I've grabbed some and I'll share that with everybody after today. But beyond that, do people have additional questions they want to get out? Mayor Pro Tem, got a list.
Do we now ask or re-ask if people have come up and spoken about their departments for clarification regarding things that they've stated that they may need in those departments that are not itemized in the budget right now? Is this the time that we're doing that, or are we doing that in the
Do you have
list?
some? Yes, if you have some you want to.
Okay. Do we ask someone to come forward, or can I just ask?
No, you can ask Greg, I mean,
Okay.
because it's his proposed, the manager's proposed budget, so.
In the engineering department, when Matt came up and spoke to us and talked about his needs, he spoke about there was a lag in doing long-range planning, and he would like to engage long-range planning, long-range with the CTP and SDP, and that possibly getting a consultant with all the information and real-time and scope and cost would assist in helping with that planning. There is, I think, itemized already a consultant fee in with the budget. Now, my question then, is this an additional cost for an additional consulting fee, or is that fee already itemized in the budget that he needs in moving forward to assist him?
So there's probably a long answer to the question, but there are already consulting fees in the budget traditionally each year that helps with engineering and planning. There are budgetary items this year. We can get you the exact dollar number. I can't quote it out of the book at this moment. But the approach there is certainly to use a consultant versus bringing on a full-time additional staff member right now because of the ebb and flow of work.
Okay.
And so we agreed, and Matt and I have had a conversation about it. The best approach right now, until we see that the coming workload and project-based type approach, is to use that external consultant. We have them on call that we can do that, and that's the approach that's recommended.
So now then the cost that's in the budget would cover that need that he spoke of in moving forward, and that there then is not an additional need for an additional consultant or an additional fee amount to be added in the budget?
Correct. And just as a point of clarification, those fees are covered out of your planning and zoning and in some cases, building inspection, which has to be kept separate, but they're kind of a self-balancing type operation. So if we have a lot of activity, a lot of growth, a lot of plans come in, then the fees that are associated with those come in as well. In some cases, TIA being one of them, they actually have to contract and have that paid for by the developer. So it might flow, but it's really project-based. And so as the workload goes up, those are going to vary, go down as it slows down.
Do I still get to go?
Yeah.
Okay. When Todd came up and spoke regarding public service, a lot of his needs, I believe right now, have to do with a facility or space. Now, are there any additional needs other than the facility or space or people? I think he said he needed a few more people. That's what I made note of here. Is that covered in this budget as well?
There are no new public services positions in this budget.
None.
And I think it's accurate to say that there's a couple things that are limiting factors there. The first being space for the people to work. And the second is additional space for equipment that they could or could not operate. So absolutely, space is a limiting factor. I don't know if Todd wants to elaborate any on that, but there are additional things that over time we will be required to do, but we're not there yet, but frankly don't have the space to do it at the present facility.
So in the fiscal year 20 capital budget, are we putting in there the dollar amount to acquire land and build public works buildings?
The CIP program and the financing plan that we've discussed has the capacity to build a facility of some sort, and there is a number that's built into that financing plan that would accomplish that. We have not identified and don't have in this budget a number that's an estimate of a facility because we don't have a land acquisition number yet. It may or may not be less than market depending on the property that's acquired, but as we come forward with a plan to address the need and a location, then we can develop a building plan. But there's, I want to say it's around $700,000 plus that is associated in that financing plan where we have the capacity to do that. But as we move forward, what would come back to you, identified location, identified scope of this is how much of a building you can build, and then we would have a cost for that building. And that would come back to the board in a capital project ordinance that would be considered and adopted by the board, would be multi-year because this type project will cross fiscal year boundaries. Property acquisition, due diligence, continued due diligence, scope, development, size, all that can be more than 12 months. So that would be how the need would be addressed moving forward. We have been looking for at least 2 years to acquire a piece of property, and the reality is in town there are limited options. We have identified an option, and we, per your board direction, are pursuing that, but we don't have an outcome yet on how that's going to turn out. So as soon as we have an answer to that question, we'll know if Site A works, and Site A will have its unique set of costs that we can put to a capital project ordinance.
Why don't we take a 5-minute biological break and reconvene at 10:10. navigate as Tracy comes back. So, all that said, do you have more that you want to get out, ask about on your list? You got to Public Works, so do you have more?
I know that Jeff said, being that he's new and now here, possibly 3 weeks, that he seems pretty comfortable with the staff. Is that correct, with the number that you have moving forward to be able to adequately handle the planning department and moving forward, once we get 3 senior planners with the UDO and to move to get that in place?
I think once we have a full staff and have everybody a little bit of time to understand the current code that we're working from in our current planning levels, so that, yes, I'm very comfortable. So after we're able to do that.
Okay, so, and with that, you suggested that, or maybe it was Matt, but you suggested that kind of a two-pronged approach. We recognize that we're behind on some things, that you'll look first at what are some quick fixes or some text amendments that could address what you guys think, your team thinks are major gaps that we need to address more quickly before we get to, and then go to the bigger task at hand, which is the all-encompassing. Did I have that right amongst you guys, the two of you? You're sitting at opposite ends, so I'm looking, who's going to nod first here, you know?
Yes, that is correct, and identifying some of those, I guess you would call them deficiencies that we have in our current ordinance, it's really to promise to fix that in our current ordinance and then make sure that we don't make those same, mistakes, maybe you could call them, or just things that we didn't add into the new.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Did you? Any more? Okay. Commissioner Wesolek, do you have any? Commissioner Burns, any additional?
So this list has already gone.
It's going to come,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. No, I don't, other than these.
yeah, the one. Commissioner Lee?
Just what I already sent you.
Okay. All right. Then at this point in time, we have no others. So our next step is I've got all of the thoughts that all 5 of us have pulled together. We've addressed many of them. I'll send the ones that are not on to Greg, but we do not need to reconvene on Thursday. We can take the next steps to go to the public hearing, which is Wednesday, right? We're meeting Wednesday. Yeah. So, no, the following Wednesday. Board meeting moved from Tuesday to Wednesday because of the holidays. So, with that, there's no further questions or clarifications.
I actually have a question.
Okay.
So regarding a CIP plan, at what point, because that would be a separate document, at what point is that discussed? Does it have to be on an agenda item at a regular meeting, work session? When do we address that?
When do you plan to bring the CIP forward?
So the CIP is going to be tied to the outcome of the master plan process for Parks and Recreation. So the adoption of the Parks and Recreation master plan will then guide the board toward a discussion of any potential CIP projects. The board may or may not include or move forward with CIP projects that are Park and Rec related. We have a developed list of CIP projects that run the gamut from transportation to the public works facility to Parks and Rec needs. The process and the discussion that the board's had in the last number of weeks has been extremely valuable, talking through how to interpret things from the master plan and the feedback that was given by residents in the survey. Dina is using methodology that you've discussed as far as using that approach that's recommended in the master plan to have some framework for you to consider those projects when you get to that point. So that all that informs what is in an adopted CIP. The key thing that's different this year is there is not a new project that is recommended to be started as part of the budget process like you might have in other years, because we've got $5 million worth of projects that are in the ongoing CIP program right now. We also have a concurrent master plan update that's still not at the finishing point. The timing is such where the board will have a real opportunity to have a vigorous CIP discussion, and then we can, the budget is adopted in June. Anytime in the fiscal year, if there's a project that has the capacity to move forward on a quick pace, the budget can be adopted to reflect what's needed. But there's $350,000 that is available both in the budget, $100,000, and $250 in the fund balance that could be used to start projects and to get those out of the gate. So that's kind of the next step for CIP. We can start that CIP discussion whenever the board desires.
Now, the CIP projects that you are talking about, and you said waiting for the master park plan to move forward, but there are other projects outside of the master plan which are tied to the CIP, be it transportation or roads or sidewalks or some form of infrastructure that, you know, are separate from the master plan. So you do have a list of those projects and itemizations and things that may be needed for the town in moving forward and in planning, not just for this year, but in, say, a 5-year span or something moving forward, or what is
Absolutely.
needed? You have, okay.
Yes, we do.
As we've adjusted regarding the police officer, does that come out of any of this additional funds?
Well, we'll have to go back and look at that and get the total cost first and look at then where the eligible places are. But absolutely, that could be a target of an adjustment, is that $100,000 that's sitting there for project planning.
Anything else? All right, then, so Melody, you can cancel Thursday's calendar invite, which is on there as tentative, and we will officially adjourn and this series of work sessions, budget work sessions, I should say. So we're adjourned.